I now invite the committee to continue its consideration of Agenda Item 71, entitled Promotion and Protection of Human Rights, and its sub-items A to D. I would like to welcome the Chair of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and in Israel, Ms. Navi Pillai, who is joining us virtually. Participants wishing to make comments and pose questions to the speaker are invited to press the microphone button within the next 3 minutes, after which the list will be closed. The time limit for each speaker will be announced before the floor is given to the first speaker. Thank you for your understanding and kind cooperation. We will now hear an introductory statement by the Chair of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and in Israel, via pre-recorded video. So when you're ready, please play the video. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, colleagues, good morning. 7th October 2025 marked 2 years since the brutal attack by Palestinian militants that killed 1,200 Israelis and foreigners in southern Israel. It also marks the date when the most ruthless, prolonged and widespread attack against the Palestinian people in history was launched by Israel. While the ceasefire and release of hostages and prisoners offer hope, they cannot undo the devastation that has already occurred. Tens of thousands of lives have been lost, entire families erased. The Gaza Strip lies in ruins, rendered nearly uninhabitable. The psychological scars to the Palestinian people and to the Israeli people will echo through generations. We must also not lose sight of a painful truth. Over the past 2 years, the actions of the Israeli government have consistently pointed towards a singular, harrowing objective: the systematic destruction of Palestinian life in Gaza. Excellencies, last month, we published a legal analysis of Israel's conduct in the Gaza Strip, pursuant to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. We concluded that the State of Israel is responsible for the commission of 4 genocidal acts in Gaza, with the specific intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza as such. The Commission also found that the Israeli President, Prime Minister, and former Defense Minister have incited the commission of genocide. A summary of these findings is included in the report presented to you today. In addition to findings on genocide, the report before you examines violations and developments related to land and housing in the occupied Palestinian territory and in Israel. In relation to Gaza, we found that Israeli officials have demonstrated a clear and consistent intent to establish permanent military control over Gaza and to change its demographic composition. Civilian infrastructure and natural resources essential to the survival of the civilian population have been destroyed in the corridors and buffer zone. The territory fragmented, and Palestinians were forcibly transferred. Israeli officials have publicly endorsed plans for the deportation of the population, the construction of settlements, and annexation of the territory. Although the ceasefire may put on hold the implementation of Israel's territorial goals in Gaza, the territorial changes made to the Gaza Strip have yet to be reversed, and recent statements by Israeli officials make it clear that these objectives remain firmly in place. This continued rhetoric underscores our deep and ongoing concern. In the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, Israeli policies and actions implemented since October 2023, including explicit and implicit support for criminal actions of violent settlers, demonstrate clear intent to forcibly transfer Palestinians, expand Israeli Jewish civilian presence, and annex the majority of the West Bank. The purpose is to prevent any potential Palestinian self-determination and statehood, and maintain an indefinite occupation. Moreover, the geographical landscape of Jenin, Tulkarm, and Nur Shams refugee camps has been significantly altered by Israeli forces through the destruction of civilian buildings and infrastructure and the displacement of Palestinian residents. In relation to land and housing in Israel, successive Israeli governments have implemented laws and policies intended to diminish Palestinian space. Additionally, informal barriers resulting from socio-economic inequalities between the two populations have grown and become entrenched over decades, further preventing integration. Our report also identified 6 Israeli ministers as likely bearing the most responsibility for international crimes, including and relating to land and housing, as well as other crimes identified in the Commission's previous reports, including the responsibility for the crime of genocide. Excellencies, genocide is one of the most heinous international crimes. It destroys in whole or in part groups of people based on race, ethnicity, nationality, or religion. It not only erases the identity of the group, but it leaves behind intergenerational trauma that causes permanent scars on humanity. It pains me that in this, my last presentation as chair of this commission, the post-World War II multilateral system has failed to prevent this genocide. The international system has been found wanting. I urge member states to use all reasonably available means to ensure the continued cessation of hostilities and a broad international support to Palestinians' right to self-determination and Palestinian statehood. Member states should also turn their attention towards ensuring justice and accountability for all victims through supporting the International Criminal Court in its investigations, using universal jurisdiction to conduct their own investigations, including of their dual nationals who are suspected to have committed crimes. My last plea is about transitional justice, which has seemed an impossible idea in recent years. It is, however, only through truth and reconciliation can peace eventually take root and flourish. Thank you.
I thank the chair of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. Colleagues, I will now open the floor for any questions or comments to Ms. Navi Pillay. As per past practice, I would ask the delegations to limit their comments to 1 minute. 1 minute. I thank you for your kind cooperation. I now give the floor to Israel, to be followed by South Africa and Egypt. Israel, as concerned country, you have 7 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Since October 7th, Israel has been fighting 2 wars, one for our security and another for the truth. In that second war, the so-called Independent Commission of Inquiry has become an active participant on the wrong side of history. The reports of the Commission are not impartial investigations. They form part of what Hamas itself calls the genocide campaign, a deliberate effort to erase Hamas's crimes and portray Israel, the victim of terror, as the aggressor. From the moment it was created in 2021, the Commission was not guided by fairness, but by bias. The establishing mandate made no mention of Hamas, not a single word, even as thousands of rockets rained down on Israeli homes. That omission was not negligence, it was by deliberate design. It is a perpetual inquiry with no end date, no accountability, and no objectivity. Some have even linked it to the Spanish Inquisition, an institution that endured for centuries, where Jews and other merely accused of being Jews were burned at the stake. Then, as now, the verdict came first, and the trial came later. Then, as now, Jews were not judged fairly. They were condemned irrationally and with hatred. The individuals chosen to lead this modern inquisition made their prejudice known long before taking office. Navi Pillai, who just briefed us, called the government to sanction Israeli apartheid before even taking the job. Would you call that impartial? Milon Kotari, who claimed the Jewish lobby controls social media and throws around money, would you call that moral integrity? Chrissy Doty, who said Jews toss accusations of anti-Semitism like rice at a wedding, would you call that professional conduct? These are not neutral experts. They are activists with entrenched hostility towards the Jewish state. Israel, by contrast, is engaged in a lawful and moral struggle, a fight against a terrorist organization that uses civilians as human shields. Our objectives are clear: to bring our hostages home, dismantle Hamas's terror infrastructure, and secure a future where Israelis and Palestinians alike can live in safety and dignity. We issue warnings before strikes. We facilitate the entry of food, fuel, medicine, and water, even as Hamas steals it for themselves. We take extraordinary steps to uphold the law because that is what defines us as a democracy. That is why this is not a genocide. It is self-defense, lawful, moral, and essential. But to sustain its narrative, the Commission of Inquiry had distorted reality itself. In its conference room paper presented earlier this year, under the chapter cynically called Summary of Factual Findings, the Commission declares, on 7 October 2023, Israel launched its military offensive in Gaza. No mention of the massacre of 1,200 innocent men, women, and children. No mention of torture, rape, and abduction of hostages. Their omission is deliberate: to erase truth and rewrite history. Like every other COI report, this one is riddled with factual distortions, selective sourcing, and inflammatory rhetoric, trading professionalism for propaganda. After 4 years of deeply biased reporting, the Commission has proven itself not as neutral investigative mechanisms, but as a political instrument. It has polarized debate, demonized Israel, and failed entirely to contribute to peace or understanding. All 3 members of the COI submitted their resignation in July, and these final reports, their parting shot, are the clearest reflection of that bias. It has proven time and again that it functions as a mouthpiece of a terror organization rather than guardian of international law. Chair, the only redeeming aspect of this report is that its publication ensures that the resignation of its authors will finally take effect. It is time to close this chapter and end this modern inquisition once and for all. To replace endless accusation with genuine accountability. To replace propaganda with truth. To remind the committee that peace will never be built on lies, but on courage, integrity, and the moral clarity to fight terror in all its forms. I want to take the opportunity to say, good riddance. Good riddance to those who have spent years polarizing this debate, demonizing Israel, and poisoning the cause of peace. With their resignation, a new opportunity stands before us to dismantle the mandate itself, to end the charade of bias, to focus our energy on what truly matters, promoting peace, not spreading lies. Thank you, Chair.
I thank Israel for the statement. I now give the floor to South Africa, to be followed by Egypt and Iraq. South Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We wish to thank Justice Pillay and the Commission of Inquiry for the seminal and invaluable work being undertaken. The fact and evidence-based research and contribution to recording the horrific details of the Israeli occupation of Palestine and the unfolding genocide in Gaza cannot be undervalued or summarily dismissed. We wish to reaffirm the words of President Ramaphosa recently when he said, "We will continue to seek justice for the people of Palestine, like the world sought to see justice for us as South Africans when they went to the United Nations to have apartheid declared a crime against humanity." We, seeing the genocide that is unfolding in Gaza, saw fit that we should act in the same way that the world acted when they opposed apartheid. South Africa will therefore continue with its case against Israel at the International Court of Justice for its contravention of the Convention Against Genocide. I thank you.
Thanks, South Africa, for the statement. I now give the floor to Egypt to be followed by Iraq, Norway, Brazil, Mexico, the European Union, Spain, Indonesia, and Liechtenstein. Egypt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the Special Rapporteur for her report, and I affirm our support to her mandate. Egypt condemns all forms of systematic violations of human rights in the occupied Palestinian territories, including Gaza. We stress the urgent need to ensure full, safe, and unhindered humanitarian access to all parts of Gaza Strip and the occupied Palestinian territory. Egypt welcomes the ICJ advisory opinion of October 22nd, 2025, and calls upon Israel, the occupying power, to comply with its national legal obligations. Egypt reaffirms the inalienable right of the Palestinian people to self-determination, including their right to establish their independent sovereign state on the lines of June 4, 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, and stresses the necessity to maintain the ceasefire as agreed in Sharm el-Sheikh summit on October 13th of this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Egypt. I give the floor to Iraq.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The delegation of Iraq likes to welcome the chair and the members of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, and we renew our support for its mandate. We condemn in the strongest of terms the crime of genocide and war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by the occupying power in the occupied Palestinian territory. We emphasize the importance of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry in the collection, consolidation, and analysis of evidence of the crimes committed by the occupying power, along with work to maintain all documents and evidence in order to put an end to impunity and guarantee legal accountability, including individual criminal accountability and the accountability for the occupying power for such occupation in order to guarantee that victims can achieve justice. Thank you.
For the statement. Norway, you have the floor.
Chair of Commission for a presentation of the Commission's latest report. Norway is deeply concerned by the reported findings. All violations of international law must be investigated, and those responsible must be held accountable. All special procedure mandate holders must be granted access to both Palestine and Israel to fulfill their mandates. Could you please elaborate on how you view the potential of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and President Trump's 20-point peace plan in enabling further investigations into the issues raised in the Commission's reports? While Norway welcomes the ceasefire and the agreement on the 20-point plan, the situation remains critical. Palestinians in Gaza must have safe and unhindered access to urgently needed humanitarian aid, and Israeli forces must continue their withdrawal. In the West Bank, the Israeli government must halt its settlement policies. The Israeli occupation must cease to ensure the Palestinians' right to self-determination and a two-state solution. I thank you.
Thank you, Norway, for the statement. I give the floor to Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All protocol observed. Brazil condemns the large-scale destruction of entire neighborhoods and civilian structures in Gaza. The report concludes that Israel's actions since 2023 intend to destroy the conditions of life for Palestinians with a view to changing its demographic composition, and accuses Israel of committing crimes against humanity, particularly the forcible transfer of the enclave's inhabitants. Brazil further condemns the continuous expansion of settlements in the West Bank, which has been accompanied by a rising violence from Israeli settlers and soldiers, and the pervasive impunity of those acts. Brazil highlights the Commission's findings on genocide. These findings are key to support ongoing investigations, delivering justice, and ensuring all parties comply fully with international humanitarian and human rights law. Brazil highly appreciates the dedication and work undertaken by the members of the Commission. We reiterate our call to the international community.
Thank you, Brazil, for the statement. I now give the floor to the European Union. Sorry, hang on, the microphone is not there. May you please try again? Could you please try again? I'll come back to the European Union. Give the floor to Spain.
Spain joins in the statement to be made by the European Union and in a national capacity states the following. We welcome the entry into force of the ceasefire agreement in Gaza, which took place after 2 years of a conflict which followed the terrorist and brutal attacks by Gaza. The agreement entails that in Gaza, 2 million people face a humanitarian catastrophe together with a famine caused by forced displacement and the loss of housing. And there is a negative drift of human rights in the West Bank and Jerusalem. Spain wishes to avoid the financial strangling of Palestine and continues to support the International Court of Justice, Special Rapporteur Albanese, and
For the statement, I now give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. We take note of the report and thank for the presentation. There must be independent investigations and accountability for all violations of international law, including human rights law and international humanitarian law. We welcome the agreement reached on the first phase of the comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict. We call for immediate and impeded access and sustained distribution of humanitarian aid at scale into and throughout Gaza, and for the UN and its agencies, including UNRWA, and humanitarian organizations to be able to work independently and impartially. The EU will reject any attempt at demographic or territorial changes in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. We oppose to any forced displacement of the Palestinian population. We are committed to a comprehensive, just and lasting peace based on the two-state solution. I thank you.
Thank the EU for the statement. I now give the floor to Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia commends the work of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Palestine in continuing to voice justice for the Palestinians. We continue to deplore humanitarian catastrophe and the deprivation of Palestinians in Gaza from resources and services essential for their survival. Indonesia welcomes the release of the advisory opinion of the ICJ on 22nd October 2025 as a turning point to restore the dignity of the Palestinian people and their inalienable right of self-determination. The occupying power must immediately restore humanitarian relief and ensure protection to UN bodies and international organizations in discharging their mandates, and refrain from further endangerment of civilians. We must continue our unwavering support to UNRWA. All of our works must be geared to end the occupation and towards the realization of the two-state solution based on UN resolutions and internationally agreed parameters. Let us work together towards this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia, for the statement. Liechtenstein, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for the floor. Liechtenstein welcomes the most recent advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, which underscores the obligations of Israel to ensure respect for IHL and to facilitate unimpeded humanitarian access. In this context, could the Commission share its assessment of how these findings relate to its own observations on access restrictions, humanitarian relief, and civilian protection in Gaza, and how member states might best support the implementation of this ruling? I thank you.
Thank you, Liechtenstein, for the statement. I now give the floor to the Russian Federation, to be followed by Canada, Cuba, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Malaysia, Japan, Germany, the United Kingdom, Chile, and the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Russian Federation.
Mr. Chairman, we closely read the report of the Independent Commission of the Inquiry. This is the fourth such investigation published by the Commission pursuant to its mandate. It's continued to uncover horrific humanitarian situations on the floor based on widespread facts. However, we're discussing the Israeli conflict at a time in which there is hope for a better future. Russia welcomes the agreement between Israel and Hamas on the cessation of hostilities in the Gaza and in the region, and we welcome the delivery of food and supplies and increase in humanitarian supplies as the ceasefire has largely facilitated by the various intermediaries. Our common task is to ensure that it doesn't collapse due to mutual recriminations. We urge all parties to stringently abide by the agreement. There's a need to be aware that this is only the very first step toward a long-term resolution of this conflict.
I thank the Russian Federation statement. Canada, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Canada is profoundly troubled by the dire humanitarian crisis in Gaza, where Israel's sustained military operations over the course of the conflict has killed tens of thousands of civilians, displaced well over 1 million people, and caused a devastating and preventable famine. Canada unequivocally condemns Hamas's terrorist attacks against Israel on October 7, 2023. We fully support the ceasefire agreement and thank all mediating states. We call on the parties to continue implementing the terms of the ceasefire agreement. This ceasefire is a critical opportunity to scale up humanitarian assistance. Israel must facilitate the immediate, unimpeded, and sustained increase of UN-led aid into and throughout Gaza, in line with its obligations under international humanitarian law. Increasing settler violence in the West Bank, including the E1 settlement project, is also of grave concern to Canada. Canada reiterates that a determination of genocide falls within the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice. I thank you.
Thank Canada for the statement, and I'll give the floor to Cuba.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2.2 million human beings in Gaza are condemned to hunger under Israel, which has the military and financial supplies and the impunity guaranteed by the government of the United States. More than 66,000 Palestinians have been assassinated, most of them women and children. The number of wounded has more than 168,000 in a health system that has been deliberately closed. This situation cannot continue. The UN is called upon to act urgently. Political speeches must translate into practical action. Madam Pillay, what measures can the international community take to put an end once and for all to the Israeli occupation and avoid violation of the human rights of Palestinians, including the right to self-determination? Thank you.
Thank you, for the statement, and I'll give the floor to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, today the extreme humanitarian crisis and crime against humanity being committed in the Gaza Strip raises grave concern in the international community. My delegation strongly condemns all continuous attacks of Israel, targeting innocent people and civilian infrastructures, including hospitals, even after the ceasefire. The Israeli Authority must immediately stop all military attacks and human rights abuses in Gaza, threatening the right to life and all innocent Palestinian people, and stop its settlement activities in the West Bank, and also stop undermining the foundation for governance by the Palestinian Authority. My delegation expresses our unwavering support for and solidarity with the Palestinian people in their just struggle for self-determination and full membership at the UN at an early date. Thank you.
Thank the DPRK for the statement, and I'll give the floor to Malaysia.
Thank you, Chair. Malaysia reaffirms our unwavering support for the work of the Commission of Inquiry. The latest report, based on rigorous and objective analysis of evidences, provides a stark and unflinching account of Israel's violations of Palestinian rights, and Malaysia underscores the importance of fully heeding its findings. The Commission's report confirms that Israel's practices in Gaza and the OPT amount to systematic violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law, possibly a genocide. Malaysia stresses that such gross violations cannot be accepted or normalized. The Palestinian people's rights must be protected and restored without delay, including their inalienable rights to self-determination. Ms. Pillay, given the weight of the evidence of Israel's violations, what immediate and concrete steps should the international community now take to ensure that obligations under
Thank Malaysia for the statement. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Japan reiterates its support for a two-state solution. We once again strongly urge the Israeli government to fully freeze its settlement activities and refrain from actions that escalate tensions and undermine two-state solutions. As such, any unilateral steps toward annexation of the West Bank are completely unacceptable. Japan has consistently expressed its deep concern over the terror inflicted by the Hamas and devastating humanitarian situation in Gaza. In this regard, we welcome the ceasefire agreement and respect the effort of President Trump and the relevant countries. Japan will continue to play a proactive role in the early recovery and reconstruction of Gaza and strongly urge all parties to steadily implement the remaining steps of the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
I thank Japan for the statement, and I'll give the floor to Germany.
Chair, Germany takes note of the report of the Commission of Inquiry. Germany fully supports the 20-point plan put forward by US President Trump and will actively contribute to its implementation. We call on all parties to engage constructively. Germany welcomes the release of the living hostages and reiterates its calls for the release and return of the deceased. We remain concerned about the humanitarian and human rights situation in the OPT. There must be unhindered humanitarian access into Gaza. In this regard, we have taken note of the advisory opinion rendered on Wednesday by the ICJ. Germany is concerned by the expansion of illegal settlements and deeply condemns the increasing settler violence in the OPT. We urge the government of Israel to reverse its decision on the expansion of settlements and practice as it undermines the possibility of a two-state solution. The only way to meaningfully end the conflict and achieve lasting peace is through negotiations. I thank you.
I thank Germany for the statement. I give the floor to the United Kingdom.
The UK notes the Commission of Inquiry's report. The UK condemns all attacks on civilians and calls for full respect for international law by all parties. The ceasefire provides a moment of hope to alleviate suffering in Gaza. Israel must lift restrictions and facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance, and Hamas must lay down their arms. UN agencies and humanitarian organizations must be able to deliver life-saving assistance. On the Commission's report, our long-standing position is that any formal judgment as to whether genocide has occurred is a matter for a competent national or international court rather than non-judicial bodies. The UK played an active role in seeking to end the war in Gaza, bringing the hostages home and advancing sustainable peace, including through leadership on humanitarian and reconstruction efforts under the Two-State Solution Conference alongside our Egyptian partners. We work closely with partners in the UN to safeguard the ceasefire and ensure humanitarian aid enters Gaza at scale and support Palestinians in rebuilding.
I thank the UK for the statement. Chile, you have the floor.
Señor Presidente.
Thank you, Chairman. We welcome the report of the Commission, which includes a study on the difficulties faced by Palestinians in using their territory, the result of military control and displacement policies by the government of Israel. Chile notes with concern the progress made by the Israeli parliament in adopting a law in order to annex the West Bank to ensure that commitments entered into for the end of the Gaza conflict. We ask upon Israel to act in good faith in the later stages of implementation. Chile calls for the cessation of hostilities, return of hostages and prisoners, and assistance to the population in the Gaza Strip. Thank you.
Thank you, Chile, for the statement. Now I give the floor to the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Iran thanks Ms. Pillai for the report and regrets her absence from the room. Ms. Pillai, kindly let us know which side of history are we standing now. It is indeed ironic that the representative of a child-killing regime accuses everyone of being impartial and unprofessional, while even at this very moment, it has not stopped killing innocent Palestinians. We note with concern, but not the surprise, the Commission's finding that the Israeli forces have committed acts amount to genocide. The report also concludes that Israeli atrocities committed crimes against humanity through forcible transfer, collective punishment, and violations of fundamental rights. The Israeli regime's gross and systematic violation of human rights against the Palestinian people continued unabated. Iran has registered this plan to hold a nationwide referendum among the people of Palestine to determine the future of their country as the most democratic path to resolve the Palestinian issue. Sympathy alone is no longer enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Iran, for the statement. Next on my list speakers will be the State of Palestine, to be followed by the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Pakistan, China, Australia, Ireland, Maldives, and Saudi Arabia. The State of Palestine, as concerned country, you have 7 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we thank the Commission of Inquiry for their report and for their briefing. Dear colleagues, for the last 2 years, there was no lack of reports or information about the genocide unfolding in Gaza and the weaponizing of humanitarian aid. There was no lack of calls for ceasefire and release of hostages either. What was missing was meaningful pressure to achieve a ceasefire. We are grateful and we appreciate the efforts of the US President together with Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey in bringing about a ceasefire to put an end to the daily bloodshed, starvation, displacement, destruction, and abduction that we have painfully witnessed. The past 2 years brought up many disappointments and many questions. What is the threshold? How many civilians must die before calling or acting for a ceasefire? Absurd questions about the nationality, ethnicity, or religion of the victims and the perpetrators before qualifying a crime as a crime. Questions about what crime level is permissible or reasonable or believable. A war crime, a crime against humanity, or a genocide, and when an international intervention is warranted. And we want to be clear about the answers. No right whatsoever gives a license or justifications to harm civilians. It's international law, it's a humanitarian and human rights law, it's common sense, it's common humanity. A crime is a crime. The nationality, the ethnicity, the religion of the victims or the perpetrators are irrelevant. And the international community must intervene before the occurrence of the crime to prevent it, especially when there is a serious risk of committing crimes. On October 8, 2023, we warned it was going to be a revenge, a collective revenge against the entire population of the Gaza Strip. And we urged for an intervention that guarantees the protection of civilians. And here we are 2 years later. The entire civilian population targeted, displaced, starved, and besieged. Nothing will bring the victims back. Nothing will console their families. But accountability is what we owe them after failing them. Accountability is deterrence, is a way forward to break the cycle of revenge and achieve the promise of a just and lasting peace. Accountability measures must also include settlers, who, as we speak right now, are burning olive trees in the West Bank, terrorizing farmers, invading villages and burning homes, killing children, beating men and women, attacking mosques and churches, enabled and protected by the Israeli occupying forces. The world must act now to prevent more crimes and to put an end to settler violence and impunity, to put an end to the Israeli occupation. Thank you.
I thank the State of Palestine for the statement. I now give the floor to the Kingdom of the Netherlands.
Thank you, Chair. The Kingdom of the Netherlands aligns itself with the EU and thanks the Commission of Inquiry. We welcome the peace plan to end the conflict and release hostages. The implementation is crucial to alleviate suffering in Gaza and an important step towards a negotiated two-state solution. Hamas should disarm and should have no future political role in Gaza. We should not forget about the West Bank. Israel's policy and practices affect the Palestinian right to self-determination. We strongly reject any plans that allude towards annexation. Forcible displacement, settlement expansion, and settler violence are unacceptable, and we call on Israel to reverse its settlement policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kingdom of the Netherlands, for the statement, and I'll give the floor to Pakistan.
We thank the Chair and members of the Commission for their thorough report.
Pakistan welcomes this report, which exposes the unprecedented destruction, forced displacement, and annexationist intent underpinning Israel's military campaign in Gaza. The Commission documents the deliberate fragmentation of Gaza through military corridors, expansion of buffer zones covering nearly 3/4 of the territory, and the systematic demolition of homes, mosques, schools, and hospitals, acts amounting to war crimes and crimes against humanity. Pakistan shares the Commission's deep concern over Israeli officials' open calls for occupation, expulsion, and settlements. They flagrantly violate the UN Charter, international humanitarian law, and multiple Security Council resolutions. Pakistan calls for the establishment of an independent, sovereign state of Palestine within the 1967 borders with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. Only a just and lasting political solution can end the suffering and bring durable peace to the region.
Thank you, Pakistan, for the statement. China, you have the floor.
Chair, an early end to the conflict and the achievement of lasting peace are the common aspirations of the people of Palestine, Israel, and the Middle East, and are also an urgent priority for the international community. Gaza belongs to the Palestinian people and is an integral part of the Palestinian territory. China believes that currently a comprehensive ceasefire in Gaza must be promoted with the greatest sense of urgency to ease the humanitarian disaster, and countries that have special influence on Israel should effectively shoulder their responsibilities. The principle of Palestinians governing Palestine must be truly implemented, and the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people must be safeguarded on post-war governance and reconstruction arrangements. We must firmly adhere to the two-state solution, build greater international consensus, and reject any unilateral actions that erode the foundation of the solution. China is ready to work with the international community towards a ceasefire in Gaza, firmly support the Palestinian people's just cause of restoring their legitimate national rights, and make unremitting efforts for an early, comprehensive, just, and lasting settlement of the Palestinian question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China, for the statement. I now give the floor to Australia.
Thank you, Chair. Australia thanks the Commission for its report, the details of which are of serious concern. We reiterate that Israel must comply with the binding provisional orders made by the International Court of Justice, and every effort must be made to safeguard innocent life. The beginning of a ceasefire in Gaza is a rare and important moment of hope. Australia welcomes what we hope will be an enduring peace for both Israelis and Palestinians. We welcome with immense relief the release of the hostages and continue to call for the return of hostage remains. Aid must now flow unimpeded to those in need. We urge all parties to adhere to the terms of the ceasefire agreement and for the full implementation of the peace plan. In the West Bank, the expansion of Israeli settlements and violent attacks by Israeli settlers against Palestinians undermine the prospects for peace and a two-state solution. Settlements are illegal under international law. Australia supports Palestinian statehood and the Palestine people's right to self-determination. We will continue to contribute.
Thank you, Australia, for the statement. Ireland, you have the floor.
Ireland thanks the Commission for its report. Ireland welcomes the ceasefire and agreement which offers a new horizon for peace. All parties must continue to negotiate the next phase in good faith and fully adhere to their commitments. Ireland strongly condemns executions and other human rights abuses by Hamas. The Commission's findings that Israel has pursued a concerted policy to forcibly transfer Palestinians from their land in the West Bank and Gaza must be taken seriously. Sustained Israeli military operations and the blockade of humanitarian aid before the ceasefire has resulted in famine and untold horror for the people of Gaza and mass displacement in the West Bank. We welcome that the 20-point plan confirms Palestinians will not be forced to leave Gaza, and strong statements from US and Gulf partners in clear opposition to annexation of the West Bank. Chair, how can the international community ensure that the human rights of all those impacted by this brutal conflict are more adequately protected?
I thank Ireland for the statement. I now give the floor to Maldives.
Thank you, Chair. Maldives aligns with the intervention of NAM. The Maldives reaffirms its support to the important work of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry and the Special Rapporteur on the situation of the human rights in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967. The Maldives believes that any attempts to discredit these mandates deters the efforts of the United Nations to ensure peace, justice, and accountability. The Commission's report concluded that Israel possessed the requisite intent to commit genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, and that Israel's systematic destruction, the creation of military corridors, and the expansion of the border buffer zone indicate the intent to establish permanent military control, annex territory, and prevent Palestinian statehood. The Maldives reiterates its call for a continued and permanent ceasefire and reiterates its solidarity with the government and the people of Palestine in their just and legitimate efforts towards the recognition of the State of Palestine. I thank you.
Thank you, Maldives, for the statement. I now give the floor to Saudi Arabia, to be followed by Ecuador. Saudi Arabia.
Mr. Chair, may the peace and blessings of God be upon you. We welcome the report of the Commission of Inquiry, and we commend the efforts of the Commission in documenting the grave violations against the Palestinian people for decades, which is reflected clearly in the report by presenting the policies of the occupation, the systematic policies in homes demolition, expansion in settlements, and genocide. We stress that the report reflects that Israel, the occupying power, failed to abide by international material law and the international human rights law, and its a continuation in violating and disregarding relevant United Nations resolutions with impunity. We reiterate our full commitment to the New York Declaration on the peaceful settlement of the Palestinian cause and the implementation of the two-state solution based on principles of international legitimacy. The mic got cut off.
I thank Saudi Arabia for the statement, and with that, we have heard the last speaker on my list. I now give the floor back to the chair of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. Ms. Navi Pillay, you have the floor.
Let me say that this commission was the first to call for a cessation of hostilities. We did that on the 10th of October 2023, a few days after the 7th. So it's taken 2 years. So obviously we welcome the immediate relief to Gazans, but there's a lot to do. For instance, our finding of genocide is not going to go away just because there's a ceasefire. There has to be justice, accountability, and investigations. It's true that the decision of the ICJ, when it comes out, will be the most authoritative, but until they deliver their decision, we as a UN body stand, provided we've supported our findings with a great deal of evidence, that it is the most authoritative statement that genocide has occurred and is occurring. I was asked what are the pressing priorities now that there is a ceasefire. Firstly, member states must ensure that no further harm is committed in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. Israel should allow aid to enter and grant full access to humanitarian and human rights organizations. Accountability is also key. Member states should also turn their attention towards ensuring justice and accountability for all victims through supporting the International Criminal Court in its investigations, but also using universal jurisdiction to conduct their own investigations, including their dual nationals who are suspected to have committed crimes. It's also important to stress that the universal obligation to prevent genocide has not ceased. It is a legal obligation that binds all states. Thank you, Chair.
Thank the chair of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel, for the response. I would now like to welcome the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967, Ms. Francesca Albanese, who is also joining us virtually. Participants wishing to make comments and pose questions to the speaker are invited to press the microphone button within the next 3 minutes, after which the list will be closed. The time limit for each speaker will be announced before the floor is given to the first speaker. I thank you for your kind cooperation. I now invite the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967 to make an introductory statement. Ms. Albanese, you have the floor.
Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On day 751 of the genocide in Gaza, I begin by honoring the victims and survivors of all genocides, past and present, including the Native Americans, particularly the Lenape people, the original stewards of the land on which the UN headquarters now stands. People of conscience long for the day when the country built on the genocides of countless indigenous nations in what is now called the United States will atone for its past and embrace a multilateralism grounded in equality and mutual respect. I deeply regret not being able to present this report in person due to unlawful and spiteful sanctions imposed on me for fulfilling my UN mandate. And thank you for those who have expressed solidarity to my persona and mandate. But this assembly should have already confronted this dangerous precedent. These measures constitute an assault on the UN itself, its independence, its integrity, its very soul. If left unchallenged, these sanctions will drive yet another nail into the coffin of the multilateral system. And yet, there is profound symbolism in the place from which I speak, South Africa, whose legacy reminds the world that freedom is indivisible. The chains on one are the chains on all. And as we gather, Gaza remains strangled, starved, shattered. Hundreds of thousands have been killed or injured. Thousands are missing, buried under the rubble, or disappeared into Israeli dungeons. And as the dust settles and the fire continues, survivors search for the remains of loved ones, while bodies long withheld by the Israeli army are returned bearing signs of torture and desecration, many in a state that makes them impossible to identify. In the West Bank, settler colonial expansion intensifies. Israeli forces raid, arrest, and kill, while violent settlers burn villages, uproot trees, seize more land, pogrom after pogrom. My report makes it clear. These horrors are neither sudden or accidental. They are the culmination of decades of moral and political failure within a resilient colonial world order sustained by a global system of complicity. Through unlawful actions and deliberate omissions, too many states have harmed, funded, and shielded Israel's militarized apartheid, allowing its settler colonial enterprise to metastasize into genocide, the ultimate crime against the indigenous people of Palestine. And how did it happen? First, diplomacy. Diplomatic fora meant to preserve peace have been used to justify and advance this genocide, dehumanizing the Palestinians, legitimize Israel's false claim to be acting in self-defense or vetoing ceasefires. Those who have dared to oppose it by using, for example, the international justice system like South Africa, Palestine, Nicaragua, or Norway before the International Court of Justice, or those who have engaged with International Criminal Court have come under heavy pressure. Second, military ties. Weapons, intelligence, and joint trainings have fed the genocidal machinery. The United States alone accounts for 2/3 of Israel's weapon imports. Dozens of other countries, though, continue trading arms and surveillance devices that have been field tested on the Palestinians. Decision makers have thereby exposed themselves to possible accountability before both national and international courts. Third, trade. Over 2 years, Israel's exports soared to $474 billion, fueling its war economy. And despite 2 years of genocide, the European Union, quick to sanction Russia over Ukraine, remains Israel's main trade partner, including in dual-use goods deployable for military purposes. This trade and all related military agreements must be immediately suspended. And last but not least, the weaponization of aid. The lawful Gaza blockade has gone largely unchallenged by states. And while attacks on UNRWA, the backbone of the UN humanitarian response in the region and in Gaza in particular, have been tolerated or repeated, the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has turned aid distribution into killing fields for starving civilians. While this has been dismantled now, this gruesome enterprise and those behind it must be held accountable. Excellencies and delegates, international law is clear. No state may aid or assist another committing international crimes. This is neither charity nor a matter of choice. It is binding upon you. It's a binding obligation, and violating it risks complicity. Therefore, states must secure a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, in ensuring full Israel's withdrawal from all occupied Palestinian territory and the dismantlement of the settlements. Second, suspend all military, trade, and diplomatic ties with Israel until it ends and remedies its genocide, unlawful occupation, and apartheid. And third, investigate and, where warranted, prosecute those potentially involved in these crimes, including those who served in the Israeli army during and profiteered from the genocide. This is how we begin to honor the memory of those killed. And if the Security Council is paralyzed, this assembly must act under uniting for peace with greater resolve than ever before. And this is how we also honor the dignity of those who survived. This is how we give full meaning to this august institution that has just turned 80. From the ruins of Gaza and from the hope of South Africa, through the resilience of Palestine, may a new multilateralism rise. Not a facade, but a living framework of rights and dignity, not for the few, not of the few, but for the many. Thank you.
I thank the Special Rapporteur for her presentation. Colleagues, I'll now open the floor for the questions or comments to Ms. Albanese. As per past practice, I would like to ask delegations to limit their comments to 1 minute. 1 minute. Thank you for your kind cooperation. First speakers on my list will be the State of Palestine, to be followed by Israel, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, South Africa, Mexico, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Iraq, Djibouti, Cuba, and Chile. The State of Palestine, as concerned country, you have 7 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Special Rapporteur, for your report and briefing. Dear colleagues, there are 2 states already existing. This is a fact. No ethnic cleansing, no occupation, no genocide, no denial of rights or existence has the power to change this fact. Palestine and the Palestinian people will not disappear. History shows us that permanently and completely erasing nations from their homeland is an illusion, but it causes unimaginable pain and lasting scars and regrets that leave no one in a safe distance. I invite you all to look at the nameplates in this room, and you will see that history informs us of what is impossible and what is possible. How nations and countries once colonized, ethnically cleansed, erased from the map are sitting among us proudly as member states. It also shows us how once old staunch foes can become friendly nations. The 2 states are an already existing reality, and the recognition of the State of Palestine is a recognition of this reality, not a maker of it. It is the first meaningful step towards achieving our freedom and independence. We are deeply grateful for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and France for their significant efforts to chart a pathway towards the achievement of a peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the 2-state solution. And we welcome the adoption of the New York Declaration and call for its full implementation. It is the best example of what the international community can collectively provide in times of darkness and despair. It provides hope and opens a horizon towards ending the illegal Israeli occupation as ruled by the ICJ. Achieve the independence of the State of Palestine and make the vision of shared peace, security, and prosperity a reality in our region. Dear colleagues, the Palestinian people want freedom and life. They want dignity and life. They want independence and life. They want justice, peace, and life. For them, it is not this or that, and it does not have to be this or that. The Palestinian people want to live and see their children grow in their homeland, free from the occupation, humiliation, and subjugation. They want to exercise the right to self-determination in all its aspects without delay. And we are very grateful for your historic, unshaken solidarity with us. We are grateful to all those who displayed unwavering solidarity and support with our people, to the countries that provided political, humanitarian, legal, and financial support, to the countries that recognized the state of Palestine, including recently. We are also grateful to the Arab and OIC member states and the OIC contact group, the Hague group, the Madrid group, and to the Global Alliance, to the members of the General Assembly and to the Security Council who stood on the right side of history. We are grateful to the United Nations and nations around the world, the human rights organizations, the media institutions. This unmatched solidarity represents the righteous consciousness that keeps us going on this peaceful and just path until rebuilding, rehabilitation, independence, freedom, and peace. Thank you.
Thank you, the State of Palestine, for the statement. I now give the floor to Israel. And as concerned country, you have 7 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let us be clear. Ms. Albanese's report is not about human rights. It is not about peace. For years, Ms. Albanese has spread anti-Semitic rhetoric and blood libels. She had exploited her elevated UN position to spread hate. She has defended terrorists and shown an ambiguous and vile contempt for Israel, the United States, and the West. When Hamas are your biggest supporters, you are not standing for peace. You are standing for terror. The truth is that this shameful report is one-sided and lacks credible legal or factual foundation. She has taken the word genocide, born from the ashes of the Holocaust, and turned it into a weapon, not to defend victims of history, but to attack them. We agree, those who promote genocide must face justice. That is why we stand against Hamas, the terrorist organization with real genocidal intent. Yet this report makes no mention of Hamas's atrocities. No reference to the October 7th massacre, no reference to the torture of Israeli hostages, no reference to Hamas's public executions of Gazans. By erasing Hamas and its crimes from her report, Ms. Albanese hides the truth, defends the terrorists, and blames the victims. She calls convicted terrorists, murderers, and rapists Palestinian hostages, equating them with the innocent Israeli hostages held in Hamas's terror tunnels. Ms. Albanese, every time you try to curse Israel with falsehood and libels, your curses fail. Ms. Albanese, you are a witch, and this report is another page in your spell book. You have tried to curse Israel with lies and hatred, but your poison has failed. Every page of this report is an empty spell. Every accusation, a charm that does not work, because you are a failed witch. Your words have no power, and your report will have no impact. Every time you try to curse us, the opposite happens. On July 3rd, you demanded sanctions against global companies, including some of America's largest, for working with Israel. 6 days later, It was you who was sanctioned by the United States, not for defending human rights, but for spreading hate and lies. You parade as a lawyer, yet hold no license to practice. Instead, you wrap your bias in the language of law, hoping it will hide what it really is: Hamas propaganda. You call Israel, the greatest threat to international peace and security, and for our suspension from every organization. Yet, it is Israel, the region's only liberal democracy, that is present in this room today. It is you, Ms. Albanese, who stands outside it. Mr. Chairman, after 2 years of war, Israel has paid a heavy price for a fragile yet vital ceasefire. Today, our living hostages are home. We are dismantling Hamas's terrorist infrastructure. We continue to fight for the return of 13 fallen hostages whose remains are still held in Gaza. Israel is not the obstacle to peace. Israel, together with our allies, is driving it forward. Ms. Albanese has devoted her energy to attack Israel, but her report shows that her campaign of defamation is expanding. Ms. Albanese attacked President Trump for what she called aggression, yet it was under his leadership that the Abraham Accords were signed, and his 20-point peace plan that laid the groundwork for today's ceasefire. Her witchcraft failed, diplomacy has triumphed. So now she directs her curses toward other nations, our allies, partners and friends who stand for democracy and the rule of law. If her latest curse is to break the partnerships that sustain peace, to cut diplomatic, strategic and economic ties, then we can only hope her witchcraft fails once again. May her curses continue to backfire, turning into blessings that build cooperation, develop alliances, and advance peace and prosperity. Through history, those who cursed the Jewish people only made us stronger. Their hatred never destroyed us. It reminded us who we are. No curse, no lie, no report will ever break the people or the state of Israel. We remain committed to ensuring the safety of our people, bringing all of our hostages home, and advancing genuine peace in the region. Thank you.
I thank Israel for the statement. Colleagues, before I give the microphone to the next speaker, I would like to remind delegations to focus their interventions on making comments or posing questions on the report, while delegations are invited to express their views on the report or the activities of the mandate holder. The comments should remain within the accepted framework of the committee, ensuring respect and maintaining the dignity and decorum of our deliberations. I request the distinguished representative of Israel to avoid derogatory and inflammatory remarks which are personal in nature. Personal attacks against mandate holders or other experts should not be tolerated. I now give the floor to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Venezuela stands in solidarity with Rapporteur Albanese for the illegal sanctions of the government of the United States against her person. After 68,000 Palestinians assassinated by Israel, the occupying power, as a result of genocide against the state of Palestine in recent years, the world welcomes. When will this end? There have been more than 80 deaths And all of this happens while the so-called defenders of human rights remain silent, or even worse, through deliberate actions, become accomplices and prolong the human suffering of an entire people, be it based on the indiscriminate veto of any effort for peace or by supplying weapons and resources to massacre civilians. The state of Palestine will always count on the militant solidarity of the people and government of Venezuela. Thank you, Chair.
Venezuela for the statement. We now give the floor to South Africa.
Thank the Special Rapporteur for a briefing and a report today. We also wish to express our disappointment at the conditions under which you are prevented from being here in person, but we are certain that you are currently enjoying your time in South Africa. We have watched the warm reception you have received from our people with humble pride. Madam Rapporteur, your report on third-party states' complicity in the genocide in Palestine by Israel is a well-researched and thought-provoking examination of the global political conditions that have enabled the occupation and genocide. It has highlighted the nature of false rhetoric and narratives used in a diplomatic environment that have been complicit in preventing constructive action against Israel for many years. In fact, you have highlighted the distortion of realities as framed by colonial narratives that dehumanize the Palestinians. We wish to ask you, are there any particular narratives that have been prominent in protecting Israel and further serve to dehumanize the Palestinian people? I thank you.
Thank you, South Africa, for the statement. And I'll give the floor to Mexico.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mexico is grateful for the submission of the Special Rapporteur's report. We value her work to make visible the consequences of the conflict in Gaza, as well as the need for decided action on the part of the international community to put an end to violations of human rights. Mexico reiterates its deep concern over the conditions faced by the Palestinian civilian population, who are suffering from an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Nothing justifies forced displacements or the lack of essential needs. We are concerned over the political, economic, and military assistance of some states, which have contributed to prolonging the occupation and to the deterioration of living conditions in Gaza. Mexico supports the actions on weapons transfers. Thank you.
Statement, and I'll give the floor to the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Iran thanks Madam Special Rapporteur for the report and briefing. We regret for not having you today. We concur with the rapporteur that many Western states have facilitated, legitimized, and eventually normalized the genocidal campaign perpetrated by the Israeli regime against Gaza to reproduce Israeli distortion of international law and colonial tropes, seeking to justify their own complicity in genocide, hiding behind diplomacy. There has been a long-standing denial of Palestinian people's legitimate right to self-determination in occupied Palestinian territories. All human rights of Palestinians have been violated, from right to life to right to culture and right to development, all in all. A genuine peace in the region depends on the accountability of the Israeli child killer regime. Iran commends the dedication of Ms. Albanese to reveal the cruelty of the Israeli regime once again, as she has been sanctioned by the Israel's staunch compliance, the United States of America.
Thank you, Iran, for the statement. Iraq, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My delegation welcomes the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967. We value her effort in highlighting the deplorable human rights situation in the OPT and Gaza. Crimes against humanity and war crimes committed by the occupying power are stressed in the reports of the SR and also the reports of the COI. They all stress that the devastation against Palestinians in Gaza is tantamount to a genocidal act. We welcome the initiative by the American U.S. President Donald Trump to end the war in Gaza, and we commend the elements in the declaration with regards to the ceasefire and the reconstruction of the Strip. The microphone has been cut off.
I thank Iraq for the statement. Chiputi, you have the floor.
Madam Special Rapporteur, my delegation commends you and it commends you personally for calmly but persistently urging member states to immediately end once and for all what is increasingly becoming the most gruesome genocide in recent human history and which we regard as completely unacceptable and totally reprehensible. Urgent further action must be taken because there is ample evidence in your report establishing clear responsibility for enabling the genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza. If there is peace to be in this region, we must protect the Palestinian people from the total destruction in the hands of those who appear determined to ethnically cleanse them out of Gaza. Colleagues, where is our humanity? Where is the distinction? Where is the line we swore we will never ever again dare to cross?
I thank Chief Chief for this statement, and I'll give the floor to Cuba.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through measures of pressure against mechanisms of human rights, we respect the United Nations Charter and there has been support for Israeli genocide in Gaza. Attempts to silence the voices of those who exterminate the Palestinian people have been in vain. We thank the Special Rapporteur for her report. We take note of her conclusions and we reiterate our solidarity. Cuba condemns strongly the assassination of civilians, especially women and children and humanitarian workers of the UN system, bombings against the people of Gaza and the destruction of housing, hospitals and civilian infrastructure, as well as essential services of the Palestine population. No one can justify the genocide which Israel is conducting against the Palestinian people through bombs. Israel has provoked a
Thank you, Cuba, for the statement, and I'll give the floor to Chile.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. Chairman, Chile is grateful to the Special Rapporteur for her report on the role of third countries of violations of human rights on the occupied Palestinian territory. We value her efforts to systematize measures which states can adopt to prevent genocide, offering a valuable roadmap to strengthen the collective responsibility to protect life and human dignity. We also appreciate the recognition of the rapporteur of countries which supported South Africa against Israel in the ICJ. And accountability is an essential pillar of the international rules-based order. If states do not promote this, international law loses legitimacy and effectiveness. Commitment to international justice must be expressed not only in statements but also in concrete actions which prevent impunity and guarantee the existence of law. Thank you.
Thank you, Chile, for the statement. Next speakers on my list will be Italy, to be followed by Romania, Egypt, Brazil, Luxembourg, Uganda, Slovenia, the Russian Federation, and Hungary. Italy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the mic will be cut off, Italy will deposit the full text. The report presented today by Special Rapporteur Albanese is entirely devoid of credibility and impartiality. As Italy, we are not surprised. The content of the report blatantly exceeds the specific mandate of the Special Rapporteur, which does not include investigations into alleged violations committed by other states or entities, nor judgments on cooperation between third countries and the ICC. Even more concerning is the complete disregard, in particular during the last month, for the Code of Conduct for Special Rapporteurs, which includes common sense principles such as integrity, impartiality, and good faith. These are not optional. They are the foundation of any credible report of the implementation of the mandate and of the United Nations itself. The Code of Conduct calls on rapporteurs to ensure their personal political opinions are without prejudice to the execution of their mission and to ensure.
I thank Italy for the statement, and I'll give the floor to Romania.
Thank you, Chair. Romania takes note of the report prepared by Ms. Albanese and expresses disappointment that a short time was allowed for the states to react to this report. Romania's export control regime is comprehensive and fully in line with international norms, national foreign and security policy objectives, and the criteria established under the European Union Common Position since 2008. Decisions of the Romanian National Export Control Authority are based on thorough risk assessment, considering end use and end users' assurances, and are guided by the principles, guidelines, and best practices of international export control and non-proliferation regimes. Romania reaffirms its strong commitment to fulfilling its international obligations, including through regular submission reports to United Nations and other regional organizations. Our long-standing approach towards Middle East peace process favors a negotiated political agreement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on the basis of two-state solution and relevant UN resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Romania, for the statement. And now give the floor to Egypt.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the Special Rapporteur for her report, and I reaffirm our support to her mandate. Egypt condemns the systematic violations of human rights in the occupied Palestinian territory committed by Israel, including in Gaza. We denounce the recent approval by the Israeli Knesset of draft laws to impose the so-called Israeli sovereignty over the occupied West Bank in a clear breach of international law. Egypt welcomes the recent advisory opinion by the ICJ, and calls on Israel to fulfill its international obligations. We stress the need for full, safe, and unhindered humanitarian access to Gaza. Egypt spares no efforts in this regard, including through the Rafah crossing, and will continue to do so. We reaffirm the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and to an independent state on the 4th June 1967 lines, with East Jerusalem as the capital, and we emphasize the utmost importance of maintaining the ceasefire as agreed in Sharm el-Sheikh summit this month. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank Egypt for the statement. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Brazil thanks Ms. Albanese for the report concerning international responsibilities of states in light of the International Court of Justice advisory opinion on the illegality of Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territory. Brazil reiterates support for her work and fully condemns all threats to human rights special procedures. Brazil underscores the imperative of compliance with all relevant UN resolutions and the ICJ advisory opinion on that matter. In particular, we emphasize that Israel must abide by its international erga omnes obligations. We welcome the ceasefire in Gaza and urge all parties to engage in good faith negotiations. We also urge unimpeded access to UN humanitarian assistance. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank Brazil for the statement. Luxembourg, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le. Thank you, Chairman. Madam Special Rapporteur, we thank you for your report, and we underscore the importance of the independence of your allegations. Luxembourg is in favor of a two-state solution, and this is expressed through the express recognition of the state of Palestine. Luxembourg respects international law, including humanitarian international law, and the ceasefire in Gaza. We reiterate our support for the essential work done by the United Nations and UNRWA. We support the mandate holders of the United Nations. What means could be used to ensure respect